Thanks very much. It's really exciting to be here in Korea. What I've seen from Seoul so far is a place where culture and technology are already very closely intertwined and involved with each other. I think that's really exciting. In the US, the words data and art don't always go together so obviously. But this is really what I'm excited about. I think the intersection of data and art will be a place for extreme innovation and when it comes to interfaces and cultural discovery. So as I said, this is really what I'm excited about, where humanity can be enhanced by technology and how we can think about cultural objects, products, interfaces, and how creativity can really inspire and move those forward. I see right now two major revolutions happening in communications, especially around representation and interconnectivity. I think these are the places where technology is really driving massive change for communication. I'm going to talk about a couple of the projects that I've made that deal with both of these two fields. I'm going to start off first with representation, how taking the intangible and making it tangible, or the invisible and making it visible, can really breathe new life into something and allow you to see it from a completely different perspective. So this is a project that I worked on a number of years ago called Flight Patterns, and it's looking at air traffic over North America. So what you're seeing is the United States purely out of airplane traffic. And as you see, everybody begins to go to sleep, and everything starts to get dark. And you'll notice on the West Coast, people now red-eye flights moving at night from the East Coast or the West Coast to the East Coast, and then everybody wakes up on the East Coast right there. And European flights start coming in. And you see everybody moving across the country as everyone wakes up, and the time zones change. And eventually, on the West Coast, you see San Francisco and Los Angeles move down to Hawaii. And you kind of get a sense for the entire infrastructure and the daily ebb and flow and life of the country just by looking at its infrastructure. Since this project, I've been working on a number of, this is, again, a time lapse. So now what you see here is that exact same data, but looking at color-coded by aircraft type. So you can see that's 24 hours of just travel paths. And I took this and broke it down into a Google Maps mashup. So here you can see, you can pan around the US and you can actually zoom in specific areas. This is looking at altitudes. You'll see white represents the lower altitudes and blue the higher altitudes. And you can zoom in and see specific airports and pan around and control it. You're also able to toggle different modes. So you can say, I want to look at the make or model. And you can pull out different attributes from the data and get a different view of the exact same area. You could scroll around and look at different airports. This is moving up the East Coast and seeing some of the chaos that's happening around New York with LaGuardia and all the three airports around there. This is, again, looking at that same data close up, looking at ascending versus descending flights, and you can see holding patterns, other attributes of the data. This is another project that I worked on with MIT Sensible Cities Lab. It's looking at the way that New York City communicates with the rest of the world. So this was set up as an interactive globe in the Museum of Modern Art in New York. And you're basically able to see with a 24-hour offset exactly how New York is communicating with other cities and the way that those relationships are changing. This is another visualization project looking at Amsterdam's KPN Telecom. So we're looking at SMS messages that are being sent in the city of Amsterdam. So here you're seeing, again, the daily ebb and flow of people throughout the city. And this is approaching New Year's Eve, where everyone says, Happy New Year. And the whole system kind of explodes with activity. And you can see other types of events. So this is, again, looking at city of Amsterdam. And here you see, again, daily ebb and flow. And you'll start to see an event called Queen's Day. People will gather in the center of the city. So you're about to see the night before, people will start gathering. And that's going to happen right about now. You'll see spikes. And then the day of the festival, everybody's celebrating in the middle of the city. So I'm really excited about what the possibilities are here. Now I'm working at Google in a group called the Creative Lab. And this is one of the applications that my team developed. This is a globe platform which you can use any data on. And this is what's exciting about this is using technology called WebGL. So it actually works directly within your web browser. So you can begin to create these interfaces and get people to use them right on their desktops or mobile devices. It's pretty exciting. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about the second aspect, which is collaboration, and this idea that now we have interconnectivity with fidelity and speed that we haven't had in the past, and it allows for some really amazing things. So my forays into dealing with collaborative creativity begin with this guy. Some of you may know him, Baron Wolfgang von Kemplen's mechanical chess playing machine. Basically, this is a robot that plays chess extremely well. Except for one thing, it's not actually a robot. There's a man, and he pretends to be a robot. And some of you may be familiar with the Amazon Mechanical Turk, but it's a web service that's named after this guy, this idea that there's people that act like machines, and that you can create an API and deliver amazing artificial intelligence, they call it, and actually use people's brains. So I was really intrigued and also disturbed by the existence of this service, but I wanted to figure out what it might be used for. So I started with this task, and I said, draw a sheep facing to the left, and I'll pay you 2 cents. And I started collecting lots of really interesting hand-drawn sheep from people around the planet. And I collected a lot of them, lots and lots of sheep. And I took the first 10,000 sheep, and I put them on a website called the Sheep Market, where you could actually buy blocks of 20 individual people's creations. And people actually weren't too happy about this. This is you can also on the website see the way that people drew them, and it really brings out the humanity of that process. So you can see all these individual people juxtaposed against this huge grid. And a lot of people were quite disturbed. They said, "This bastard is selling our sheep." And I thought it was really interesting how attached they got to the creative process, and how the fact that they weren't really aware of what was going to happen changed their perspective of the entire system. And as you can see, some pretty interesting characters popping up in there. So here's a little bit of data about the project. It was about 11 sheep per hour. There were 662 sheep that didn't meet sheep-like criteria and were thrown out of the batch. And there were 7,599 unique IP addresses, so that's about how many people participated. But of those 7,599, only one of them asked this: why? Why are you doing this? What's the point? Which I think is a pretty valid question. There were a lot of reasons that I chose sheep. I think there's some pretty interesting metaphors. The first animal to be mechanically processed for byproducts, selectively bred for production traits, first animal to be cloned. There's also obvious connotation with sheep being a follower. And the story, Le Petit Prince, where he draws a sheep and he says, it's not about drawing one sheep that is the perfect sheep, but it's about he draws sheep after sheep, and he finally draws a box, and he says, use your imagination. There's so many different variations and so much creative potential. I like the moral of that story. So this is another project where I took frames from Charlie Chaplin's film Modern Times and divided it into 16 pieces. And each little piece was given to a worker, and I said, draw what you see. And they began creating things without knowing what they were working on. So here you see on the left-hand side the original, on the right-hand side 16 workers version of that, unbeknownst to them. So using the same principle of taking little pieces, I worked with a good friend of mine, Takashi Kawashima, and we created a $100 bill with 10,000 little pieces, each paid to a worker 1 cent. And we said, without telling them what they were doing, here's 1 cent, create what you see. And we ended up rendering this huge $100 bill. And what's interesting about this was, unlike the sheep, where we threw out the things that didn't meet sheep-like criteria, we included everything in this $100 bill. So it becomes a visualization of how well people did what it was they were asked to do. And if you browse, you can see things like smiley faces and stick figures and some pretty interesting things. So if you go to the 10,000cents.com, you can actually trade real $100 bills for these forged $100 bills and make a donation to One Laptop Per Child project. But if you look at each individual piece, you see all kinds of different contributions. Some people were extremely dedicated. Here you see a guy doing a stipple rendering, very carefully emulating exactly what he saw on the left-hand side. But on some of the others, you'll see people just doing whatever they want. Here's somebody who draws some lips. There's some smiley faces. This person's writing, 1 cent? Really? That's all you're going to pay me to do this task? Which I think is an interesting thing, because it turns out that financial motivation is not always the strongest. In fact, I think it's often one of the weaker motivations, especially in this context. More recently, I worked on a project called the Single Lane Superhighway, where I asked people just for the fun of it to create drawings of cars. And there was a little tool that when you drew into a circle, it would automatically animate that wheel of the car. And it was a pretty fun little task. So over a couple weeks, I gathered 50,000 cars, which was enough for me to feel like I didn't want to moderate them anymore, because some of them also weren't cars. So if you go to the Single Lane Superhighway, you can see these 50,000 cars drive by if you sit there for enough days. It's a pretty interesting experience, and there's some beautiful cars in there as well. So stepping back for a minute, this is a project that I worked on a number of years ago with a director named James Frost. It's a music video for the band Radiohead. We basically used 3D scanners and collected a bunch of point data and built a video without video. So here you see Tom York's face. What was really exciting to me about this project, though, was that we open sourced it and we released all the data so that people could build their own versions of the music video. And kind of a community developed around it. So here you see 2 different people, one doing a pinboard version of Tom York and one doing a Lego Tom York. I thought it was really exciting to see people completely rethinking what this data could mean. More recently, somebody even 3D printed Tom York's head, which is a little bit creepy, but pretty darn cool. So I met up with another music video director named Chris Milk, and we both were really excited about the potential of connecting people with full knowledge of what they were doing in order to create something bigger and more meaningful. And with that, we met Rick, or he knew Rick Rubin, who was producing Johnny Cash's final album. And the lyrics to the song off his album are "Ain't no grave can hold my body down." And we thought this was the perfect opportunity to build a living, breathing memorial for Johnny Cash using his fans. So as I'm sure all of you know, well, stepping back for a second, we created this online drawing tool. A good friend of mine named Mr. Doob, an amazing programmer, helped to create this tool which allows you to create trace renderings, kind of like images that are based off of another image. And you can create these kind of beautiful but limited images using black and white and a specific set of brushes. So as you all know, an animation is a series of frames. So if each person was to draw a portrait of Johnny Cash, and then we could put those together to create an animation, you get this kind of stop motion, collaborative, flowing through different people's thoughts animation. So I'm going to show you a short clip of what that music video that is constantly evolving looks like, and then a very short clip of what people had to say about that project. And I think there's audio for this, if we can get that working.
There ain't no grave can hold my body down. There ain't no grave can hold my body down. When I hear that trumpet sound, I'm gonna rise right out of the ground. Ain't no grave can hold my body down. Well, look way down the river, and what do you think I see? I see a band of angels, and they're coming after me. Ain't no grave can hold my body down.
What better way to pay tribute to the man than to make something for one of his songs?
I felt really sad when he died, and I just thought it would be wonderful. It would be really nice to contribute something to his memory.
It really allows this last recording of his to be a living, breathing memorial.
For all of the frames to be drawn by fans, each individual frame, it's got a very powerful feeling to it.
I've seen everybody from Japan, Venezuela to the States, to Knoxville, Tennessee.
As much as it's different from frame to frame, it really is personal.
Watching back the video of my last frame, I could see me not understanding at the beginning of it, and I just worked through problems until my little wee battles that I was fighting within the picture all began to resolve themselves. You can actually see the point where I know what I'm doing when a light and a dark comes into it. And in a weird way, that's what I actually like about Johnny Cash's music as well. It's the sum total of his life, all the things that have happened, the bad things, the good things, you're hearing a person's life.
So if you go to the website, thejohnnycashproject.com, what you see is the music video playing on top, and then on the bottom, these stalactites of images, which are different variations of every frame. So the music video is constantly being hand-drawn by different people, and you can sort it based off the data. So you can say, I want to see the most recent frames, or highest rated. Here you see selecting individual frames from the stalactites, and if you click on any one of them, you can actually drill down and see that frame, some information about the person, where they were located, how long they spent drawing it, and you can actually watch the process play back again, so you can kind of get some insight into what that person was thinking when they created that frame. And as I said, you can go back to the original data set and you can sort and mix and match. You can say, I want to see the director's cut, or I want to see abstract frames or point-to-list frames, and use the metadata to sort and rebuild the video dynamically on the fly. The last project that I'm going to talk about very briefly was another collaboration with Chris Milk. We were really interested in how we could take the music video a bit further. We're now working with a different medium. It's no longer stuck into a 4:3 one-way transmission. Now music videos can actually take advantage of dynamic data sets and interactivity and breaking out all over the screen. So we wanted to experiment with that a little bit. We worked with a band called Arcade Fire to build a project called The Wilderness Downtown. The way that this works is it actually uses Street View and Google satellite images. And it starts off by asking you the hometown where you grew up. So you type in the home address where you grew up, and it begins to pull down all that information specifically for you and build that music video experience about the area where you grew up. So if you get a chance, you should try to give this a shot. This is what it would look like for somebody else, although you have to imagine it tailored for your own data. Here's a quick look at it. There's also audio on this. I don't know. So if there's one thing to take away from my talk here, I think it's that an interface can be a really powerful narrative device, and that we should keep this in mind and remember what creativity can bring to with the fusion of technology when thinking about interfaces and the future of technology and communications. Thank you very much.